For days, he had held it open. It was a small gesture, almost invisible. Every time he approached that north exit of the Willow Park apartments, Matthew Paul would shuffle forward on his injured foot, push the door, and then pause. He'd use his shoulder, his back, his hand, whatever it took, to keep that heavy door from swinging shut. He'd stand there for a second, a human doorstop, and then he'd move inside. And every time, like clockwork, Stephanie Pavlons would follow. She never had a key. The footage shows it all. A silent, daily dance. His hobbling entrance, the held breath of the open door, and then her, stepping through the space he made for her. It was against his lease. It was their little secret. A tiny, physical proof of their connection. He entered, and she followed. But on August 23rd, at 11:14 in the morning, the dance changed. The camera sees him come back from an appointment. He's carrying a large pink water bottle under his arm. He approaches the same door. He opens it. And this time, he walks right through. He doesn't look back. He doesn't pause. He doesn't wait. The door swings shut behind him with a solid, metallic click. It's the sound of a story ending. It's the sound of someone who knows, with absolute certainty, that no one is following him anymore. This is not a story about a smoking gun. There wasn't one. This is not a story about a clear crime scene. It was lost to time in the woods. This isn't even a story where a medical examiner could point to a single cause and say, "This is how she died." This is the story of an unwritten murder. A story where the proof wasn't found in a wound, but in a pattern that broke. Where the witnesses weren't people, but things. A water bottle, a purse, a text message, a search history, and a door that finally closed. This is the case where a man tried to commit the perfect, untraceable crime and was convicted by the ordinary, silent objects of everyday life. The smell hit them first. On September 9th, 2022, in a vacant lot in Waukesha, Wisconsin, 3 construction workers were posting "no trespassing" signs. The air was thick with late summer, and the ground near the tree line was overgrown. That's where the odor came from, sweet, heavy, and utterly wrong. Their call to 911 was calm, almost matter of fact. A dead body. In the woods. Been there a long time. What they found was a tragedy stripped down to its bare, grim essentials. The remains of a woman, lying in the tall grass near the trees. She wore dark jeans, white tennis shoes, and a loose, long black t-shirt. No wallet. No ID. No obvious signs of what had happened. Just 15 feet away, 2 strange bookmarks, a single vape, and a clean and used scalpel. She was a ghost. No name. No story. No one had reported her missing. It would take days to give her back her name, Stephanie Pavlons. 44 years old. A mother to a 19-year-old daughter. A woman who lived sometimes with her parents, sometimes with a boyfriend. A private person, her mother said. It wasn't unusual to not hear from her for a bit. When the medical examiner tried to find the story of her death in her body, the pages were blank. Decomposition had erased the text. No clear cause of death. No manner. Natural, accident, suicide, or homicide. Even toxicology was a struggle, only finding traces of her own prescriptions in the limited tissue that remained. She took medication for seizures, for neck pain, for anxiety. Did she have a seizure and wander off? Did her medications mix in a terrible way? Did she simply lie down in those woods, overwhelmed by life, and let it go? Or did someone make that decision for her? The woods offered no answers. The science offered no clarity. This was the profound, haunting mystery at the start. How do you investigate a death that left no physical fingerprints? How do you prove a murder when you can't even prove how the person died? Asterisk, asterisk. You have to look for a different kind of evidence. You have to listen for a story told in whispers, not shouts. You have to find the pattern, and then find the moment it shattered. The first crack in the silence came from an apartment building a few miles away. From a digital memory that never forgets. While Stephanie's body lay nameless in the morgue, detectives turned their attention to the last place she was known to be alive. The Willow Park apartments, and her on-again, off-again boyfriend of 20 years, Matthew Paul. They didn't knock on his door. Not yet. First, they went to building management and asked for the eyes that never blink. the surveillance cameras. And there, in grayscale and time stamps, they found the rhythm of 2 lives. They saw Matthew, limping from his broken foot, coming and going. And they saw the pattern. That door. The north exit. Every time Matthew approached it, the routine was the same. He'd struggle to open it, then perform that small, consistent act of holding it. A beat later, Stephanie would enter the frame and slip inside. It was proof she was living there, against the lease. It was proof of a connection. But more than that, to a detective's eye, it was a behavioral signature. This was their normal. This was the track their relationship ran on. He led. She followed. He held the door. The footage gave them a timeline, and it gave them a last sighting. August 23rd, 8:39 a.m. Stephanie walks out of the north exit. She's wearing the jeans, shoes, and black t-shirt she would be found in 17 days later. In her hands are 2 items that become crucial, silent characters in this story: a large pink water bottle and a black purse with a chain strap. At 8:40, Matthew exits, carrying a plastic bag. His truck's dash camera catches a few seconds of him picking her up. They drive to a gas station for breakfast. She throws away the trash. It is the last time any camera in the world would see Stephanie Pavlons alive. The digital shadow then follows their phones. Cell tower data places them together, moving toward the Orthopedic Associates of Wisconsin building, the OAW, where Matthew has a 9:34 a.m. appointment for his foot. He goes in. He even snaps a picture from the waiting room and sends it to a friend. A normal moment. A potential alibi. Stephanie doesn't go in. The assumption is she waits in the truck. His appointment ends at 10:33 a.m. And here is where the solid ground of data gives way to a void. For the next roughly 20 minutes, both of their cell phones sit in the area of the OAW building. They aren't moving. They're just there. Then, at 10:52 a.m., the phones begin to move again, traveling together back toward the apartment. This 20-minute gap is the black hole at the center of the case. A silent pocket of time in a busy area, next to a medical center and a golf course. What happens in this gap is everything. It is the moment Stephanie Pavlons vanishes from the observable universe. When the detectives review the apartment footage for that afternoon, they see the return. But only half of it. At 11:14 a.m., Matthew Paul enters the north door of Willow Park Apartments. He has the large pink water bottle under his arm. For the first time in all the footage they've reviewed, he does not hold the door open. He walks through. He lets it close. Stephanie does not follow. An hour later, he's on camera again, leaving. He returns moments later carrying a plastic bag. The shape inside is bulky, soft. Detectives would soon become convinced they were looking at Stephanie's black purse. The digital shadow told a stark, visual story. She left with him, carrying her water bottle and purse. He returned alone, with her water bottle. He later retrieved her purse. She was gone. The rhythm was broken. The door had closed. Now, it was time to ask the man who had been holding it open what he thought happened. 5 days after Stephanie's body was identified, but before the news was public, detectives brought Matthew Paul in for a talk. They were careful. They didn't tell him Stephanie was dead. They just said they were looking for her. What followed was a masterclass in watching a man build a cage around himself, one shaky lie at a time. He was concerned, he said. He hadn't seen Stephanie in weeks. He had a bad feeling. When prompted about the last time he might have seen her, he vaguely recalled taking her to his orthopedic appointment. Yes, she waited in the truck. He came out, and she was just gone. He couldn't call her, he explained, because she'd left her phone at the apartment. He was so worried, he said, that when he was cleaning out his truck at a car wash over a week later, he made a shocking discovery. Her purse was in the back seat. That's when he really got scared. As Matthew spun this tale, officers were searching his apartment and truck. They found 2 things that made his story crumble in real time. The pink water bottle, sitting on his floor. The black purse with the chain strap, tucked in his dresser. The detectives presented him with the video stills. Asterisk, here you are, Matt, at 11:14, coming home with her water bottle. Here you are, less than an hour later, walking in with a plastic bag. That's her purse in that bag, Matt, asterisk. Matthew's performance began to fracture. He scrambled. There were 2 purses, A black one and a gray one. He found the gray one at the car wash. He was talking about the other one. And the phone? First she left it at home. Then maybe it was in the car. His story was a house of cards and a breeze. But his most desperate prop was still to come. He claimed that during that same car wash cleaning, he found something else under a floor mat. A note, written by Stephanie on yellow paper. It read, "I hate you. I hate being blamed for __ I didn't do. I'm done being used, abused, and taken for granted. I'm not allowed to speak my mind around you, drive, spend money, or even feel good. Karma came back to you 'cause your foot injury, not me. Go be with your virgin 'cause I'm done." He offered it as proof. Proof she was miserable. Proof she might have left him, or worse, taken her own life. It was a note of rage and despair, and he wielded it like a shield. But to the detectives, the note did two things. First, it painted a horrifying picture of the relationship, one of control, abuse, and degradation. Second, it felt too convenient. Found under a mat. After weeks, it wasn't a heartfelt confession found in her diary. It was a piece of evidence presented by the very person it accused. Matthew Paul wasn't just lying. He was stage managing. He was trying to plant the set dressing for a different story. The story of a woman who walked away, or a woman who gave up. He was trying to write an ending that didn't involve him. But while he was clumsily arranging his props, the detectives were finding the real script. It was written in Stephanie's own hand, over years, and it told a much deeper story. To understand the end, you had to understand the middle. And to understand the middle, detectives went to the Pavlons' home, where Stephanie kept a collection of journals. The pages were a map of a hidden war. Entries from 2020 and 2021 described a relationship of chilling control. She wrote of Matthew's temper, his hateful eyes. She wrote of him taking her prescription medications for himself, then growing angry when she needed them. She described feeling like a doormat, having no one, being trapped. The entries weren't constant despair. There were good days, happy weeks. But the bad always returned. The portrait was of a cycle of dependence, manipulation, and fear. This was the reality behind the yellow note. The note wasn't an aberration. It was a scream that had been building for years. Meanwhile, Matthew was living another life entirely. On his computer, detectives found relationships with two women in the Philippines. Romantic, committed conversations on Skype. He was planning a trip. The evidence suggested he'd even told Stephanie she could come along. But the real plan, prosecutors believed, was to have her nurse him back to health from his foot injury before he started a new life without her. He was a man at a crossroads. On one path, a dependent, unhappy girlfriend he saw as a burden and a future with a new woman overseas. On the other, a messy breakup, potential drama, complications. And then there was the third path, the unthinkable one. Motive is not always a raging fire. Sometimes it's a slow, cold calculation. The desire for a clean slate. The elimination of a problem. Stephanie, in those final weeks, was sending signals that threatened his clean slate. She had reconnected with an old friend, Andy. Their messages were hopeful, planning dinners, talking about fresh starts. On her Facebook, she posted a photo from her parents' garage, smirking at the camera. It was the face of a woman looking forward, not giving up. She was gathering the strength to leave. The yellow note may have been her declaration of independence. I'm done. For a controlling person, the greatest threat isn't hatred. It's departure. It's the loss of control. So, on August 23rd, the dance went to its final location. He drove them to his appointment. He went in, establishing his presence. He came out. And then, in that 20-minute gap, the final argument happened. The one where I'm done was met not with acceptance, but with a terrifying, final refusal. The state would later theorize that she, to escape the argument, got out of the truck and walked toward the wooded area for cover. He followed. There was a struggle. Her vape fell. And in that struggle, he used what was at hand. Not a scalpel. Not a weapon he brought. He used the strap of her own black purse. It was the ultimate symbol of control, using the very object that represented her independence to take it away forever. A silent, brutal irony. He then faced a problem. A body. In the woods, but not well hidden. A busy area. He had a broken foot. He couldn't carry her far. So he did what he could. He left her. He took the purse, the weapon, and her water bottle. He drove home. He let the door close behind him. And then he began the pantomime. The performance of the confused boyfriend. The carefully discovered note. The internet searches that would betray him more than any confession. Physical evidence was thin. The murder weapon was a purse strap, nearly impossible to prove. The cause of death was undetermined. So how do you build a murder case? You look for knowledge that shouldn't exist. Matthew Paul's cell phone and computer became a window into a guilty mind. In the weeks after August 23rd, but before Stephanie's body was found on September 9th, he began a series of internet searches that were like a quiet scream into the digital void. He searched Stephanie's name repeatedly. He searched her name alongside the word obituary. He searched her name alongside local funeral homes. Think about that. The woman you love is missing. You say you're worried sick. What do you search? How to find a missing person. Waukesha missing persons. Local hospitals. You don't search for her obituary. You search for her obituary when you know there will be one to find. He visited his father's house and made similar searches on his father's devices. He told one of his girlfriends in the Philippines, "I'm really worried about something, but I can't tell you through text. Something happened, hun. I can't explain." And then he spoke to her for 2 hours on Skype, off the record. This was the digital equivalent of nervous pacing. A man checking to see if the secret was out. A man waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then, on September 9th, the day construction workers stumbled upon the awful smell, Matthew had another appointment at the OAW building. His dash camera recorded his drive. As he approached, he saw the fleet of law enforcement vehicles, the crime scene tape, the officers. Anyone else might have been confused, curious. They might have pulled in anyway, late for their appointment, asking what was going on. Matthew didn't do that. He drove straight past the entrance. He took a long, slow detour through a subdivision, his camera capturing a seemingly aimless drive. Then, eventually, he circled back. The state's argument was simple. Only a person who knew exactly what was in those woods would avoid that parking lot like the plague. It was the behavior of a man seeing his deepest fear realized. The body had been found. At trial in late 2023, the battle was over a story. The defense faced the giant, reasonable questions head-on. How could this happen in broad daylight, in a busy area, with no one seeing? How could a man with a broken foot drag or carry a body into those woods? Where's the physical proof? The cause of death is unknown. It could have been an accident, an overdose, a suicide. You cannot prove a murder beyond a reasonable doubt with this. And they were right. If you looked only for the classic pillars of a homicide case, they were missing. The prosecution had to build a different kind of case. A case made not of what, but of who knew what and when. They presented the pattern of the door, broken on August 23rd. They presented the journals and the note, painting a motive of control and a final breaking point. They presented the purse and water bottle, physical proof he possessed her items immediately after she vanished, contradicting his own story. They presented the 20-minute gap, the void where she disappeared while with him. They presented the internet searches, the proof of guilty knowledge. They presented the detour on September 9th, the behavior of a man avoiding a discovery only he could anticipate. They asked the jury to listen to the silence, to look at the negative space. In her closing argument, the prosecutor didn't try to hide the lack of forensic certainty. She leaned into the story. "She can't just sit there any longer," she said, describing Stephanie's decision to leave the truck. She decides to walk towards that wooded area, and he goes after her. He gets out of the truck. He comes after her. She held up the black purse. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the murder weapon." He wraps this around her neck. He strangles her for just a minute or two. That's all it takes. He uses the strap of her own purse to kill her. It was a narrative, a plausible, haunting reconstruction built entirely on circumstantial evidence. A story that connected all the strange, silent dots. The defense pleaded for the jury to demand harder proof. What proof does the government have that Stephanie was even killed by another person? The jury deliberated for just over an hour. The verdict was guilty. First-degree intentional homicide. Hiding a corpse. They believed the story. They believed the pattern. They believed that Matthew Paul's own words, his own searches, his own behavior in the days after August 23rd, screamed the truth that the woods and the autopsy could not. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Some murders are written in blood, in ballistics reports, in clear wounds under a medical examiner's light. The murder of Stephanie Pavlons was written in the negative space. It was written in the absence of her key to an apartment, in the absence of her body from the truck on the return journey, in the absence of her name from any missing persons report, in the absence of any logical reason for a worried boyfriend to search for her obituary. But it was also written in the presence of things that shouldn't have been there. Her water bottle in his apartment hours after she vanished. Her purse in his dresser. His knowledge of her death weeks before the world knew. Matthew Paul thought he could control the narrative. He presented a note, a story of a car wash discovery, a performance of concern. He tried to write a story where he was a bystander to tragedy. But he forgot about the other authors. The silent ones. The surveillance camera that recorded a changed habit. The cell tower that logged a 20-minute pause in a life. The search engine that remembered his dread. And the door. That heavy apartment door. For days, it had been held open, a metaphor for a connection, however flawed. On August 23rd, at 11:14 a.m., it was allowed to swing shut with a final, metallic click. It was the loudest sound in the entire case. The sound of a story closing. The sound of a man who knew, definitively, that he was walking into the rest of his life alone. Because the door knew. The water bottle knew. The purse knew. And in the end, a jury of 12 people knew, too. The story of Stephanie Pavlons and Matthew Paul is a blueprint of a modern mystery. It shows us that in a world saturated with data, with cameras on every building and digital footprints trailing behind us like shadows, the perfect crime is a fading fantasy. But this case whispers a darker, more enduring truth. It wasn't the technology that convicted Matthew Paul. Not really. It was his own profound inability to understand the story he was already in. He was so focused on the lie he needed to tell, he became blind to the truth he was already showing. He thought the game was about fooling detectives. He didn't realize the game had already been played and lost in 100 tiny moments he never thought to script. Let's step back into that negative space one last time to see what he missed. Consider the yellow note. In Matthew's mind, it was a masterstroke. A piece of paper that explained everything. Asterisk C. She was unhappy. She hated me. She could have done anything. Asterisk. But to an investigator, that note was a flashing neon sign pointing directly at him. Why? Because of when and how it entered the story. Genuine suicide notes or final messages are almost always found by family, by friends, in a place that makes sense for the person who wrote it. On a pillow. On a kitchen table, in a journal. They are not discovered by the primary person they accuse, weeks after the fact, under a car mat during a cleaning that video footage shows never happened the way he described. That doesn't feel like a tragic discovery. It feels like a plant. It feels like a piece of evidence being entered into the record by the defense. Matthew saw the note's content. I hate you. He thought that was enough. The detectives saw the note's context. A staged revelation. That was everything. This was his fatal flaw. He believed the what was more important than the how. He thought if he provided the right pieces, the unhappy girlfriend, the possible overdose, the wandering off, people would assemble them into the picture he wanted. He didn't understand that humans, and especially detectives, don't just look at the pieces. They look at the hand that's placing them on the board. The same flaw crippled his story about the purse. He invented a slow-burn worry that culminated in a shocking find at the car wash. It's a dramatic beat, a moment of realization. The problem was, the security camera at that car wash saw the same moment, and it saw no drama. No pause. No shocked man pulling a woman's purse from his truck. It saw a man cleaning his car, normally. He provided the what. I found it later and got scared. The video provided the how, a calm, ordinary chore. The contradiction between the two was a canyon of guilt. He was writing a novel, But he forgot he was also a character in a documentary. The documentary footage kept contradicting the novel's plot. The internet searches are perhaps the most chilling part of the entire case. They are a pure, unfiltered window into a mind that knows a secret. Let's break down why these searches are so powerfully damning. They operate on a concept called guilty knowledge, knowing something only the perpetrator or someone intimately connected to the crime could know. Stage 1. The missing person phase, normal worry. If your partner is genuinely missing, your searches look like this. Asterisk, how to file a missing person report Waukesha. Asterisk, hospitals near me. Asterisk, Stephanie Pavlons, hoping for news. Asterisk, car accident I-94 yesterday. You're searching for signs of life, for accidents, for ways to find her. Stage 2. The guilty knowledge phase, the truth. Matthew's searches skipped stage 1 entirely. He went straight to asterisk, Stephanie Pavlons' obituary. Asterisk, Stephanie Pavlons' funeral home. This is the behavior of someone who knows the search is not for a living person, but for a dead one. He's checking to see if the death he knows about has become public yet. He's monitoring the fallout of his own actions. Every time he typed her name into that search bar, followed by obituary, he was having a conversation with himself. He was asking the digital world, do you know what I know yet? The internet always remembers. Those searches were a silent, persistent scream. They were a confession typed into a search bar, each one a tiny, digital nail in the coffin of his presumption of innocence. His trip to his father's house to make similar searches adds another layer. It speaks to a nervous, compulsive need to know. It also suggests an attempt to spread or share the psychological burden of his secret, or to use a different device, thinking it might not be traced. It's the behavior of a man feeling the walls close in, looking for any crack to see out of. And his message to his girlfriend in the Philippines, I can't explain in text, is the ancient, instinctive fear of creating a record. It's the voice of guilt, knowing that some truths are too dangerous to let exist in writing. That 2-hour Skype call was a black hole of information. Whatever was said there is known only to 2 people. But the mere fact that he refused to text it shouted volumes to the jury. All of this, the searches, the detour, the secretive call, paints a portrait of a man orbiting around a hidden center of gravity, the body in the woods. His entire existence in those weeks was defined by reacting to a secret only he held. The defense at trial had a powerful, honest argument. They stood before the jury and pointed at the giant, empty spaces in the prosecution's case. You don't know how she died. The doctor cannot tell you. You don't know exactly where she was killed. You have a theory about a purse strap, but you have no proof. You have a man with a broken foot you say dragged a body. Where is the evidence in the terrain? Where are the witnesses at a busy medical center? The burden of proof is on them, and they have not met it. This is all a story. A compelling, perhaps convincing story, but not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the terrifying cliff edge of a circumstantial case. The jury is asked to make a leap. They are asked to look at a constellation of isolated facts, a door, a bottle, a search history, a lie, and see not just a random scatter of stars, but a clear, unmistakable picture. The prosecution's job was to give them the lines to connect those dots. They had to build a narrative so coherent, so logically airtight, that the only possible picture it could form was the one of Matthew Paul as a murderer. They did not ask the jury to ignore the unknowns. They asked the jury to define the unknowns through his behavior. Asterisk, we don't know the cause of death? Then why was he searching for her obituary? Asterisk, we don't have an eyewitness? Then why did he lie about how he got her purse? Asterisk, we can't prove the exact moment? Then why did his pattern of holding the door break at that exact moment? They inverted the defense's argument. The defense said, you can't prove it, so you must acquit. The prosecution said, his behavior only makes sense if he did it. Therefore, his behavior is the proof. The jury's swift verdict, just over an hour, tells us they found the prosecution's narrative not just plausible, but irresistible. The dots, when connected, formed a picture of guilt so clear that arguing over the shade of individual dots seemed pointless. They believed that while science couldn't speak from the grave, Matthew Paul's own actions in the world of the living spoke for it. Beyond the courtroom, beyond the verdict, the story of Stephanie Pavlons is a stark window into a silent, pervasive kind of violence. Her journals did not describe dramatic, public beatings. They described a slow erosion, a control over medication, a control over money, a control over her voice. I'm not allowed to speak my mind. The isolation, the feeling of being a doormat. This is the anatomy of coercive control, a pattern of behavior that seeks to dominate, isolate, and exploit another person. It's a violence of increments, of tiny prisons built from rules and anger and dependence. The yellow note was the eruption after years of slow pressure. Her story is tragically common. Many who experience this kind of relationship are not missing in the official sense until it is far too late. They are often isolated from friends and family. Their absences are explained away by partners. Their private despair is hidden behind closed doors. Matthew Paul's statement that she was always chasing the demons in her head is a classic technique, pathologizing the victim, framing her reaction to his abuse as her own inherent instability. Her journals reveal the truth. The demon wasn't in her head. It was in her home, controlling her pills, glaring at her with hateful eyes. Her reconnection with her friend Andy in those final weeks is the most poignant detail. It is a flicker of light. It is evidence of a self trying to reemerge, to reach out, to build a bridge to a life beyond the control. It is proof that she was not a passive victim of her own demise, but a woman actively, bravely seeking a way out. This makes her fate all the more devastating. She was so close. She had written her Declaration of Independence. She had made a new friend. She was smirking in a garage, planning a dinner. Her murder was not just the ending of a life. It was the violent deletion of an escape plan. It was control exerting its ultimate, monstrous price for her attempt to be free. So we return to the sound that began this story. The click of a door. In the end, what convicted Matthew Paul was not a single piece of evidence, but the overwhelming weight of a story that could not be told any other way. It was the convergence of 100 tiny testimonies. The testimony of the apartment door, which changed its routine on August 23rd. The testimony of the pink water bottle, traveling from her hand to his apartment floor. The testimony of the black purse, moving from her shoulder to his dresser drawer via a plastic bag. The testimony of the cell phone tower, logging a 20-minute pause in a field next to some woods. The testimony of the search bar, echoing with questions about obituaries. The testimony of the dash camera, capturing a detour away from police lights. The testimony of the car wash camera, which saw no dramatic discovery. The testimony of the journals, speaking of years of fear. The testimony of the hopeful Facebook messages, speaking of a future. And the damning, silent testimony of Matthew Paul himself. Through every lie, every changed story, every performative act of worry that was contradicted by a digital record. He tried to write a story where he was a concerned boyfriend, confused and abandoned. The world, in its silent, factual way, wrote back a different story. A story of control, of a final argument, of a purse strap used in a wooded area, of a secret carried for 17 days until the smell gave it away. The jury heard both stories. They believed the one written by the facts. The door clicked shut. The law agreed. A life sentence was passed. But the echo of that click asks a final, unsettling question of us all. What stories are our own everyday actions writing? And if we ever tried to lie about them, how many silent witnesses, our own digital shadows, the objects we touch, the patterns we break, would rise up to tell the truth? Asterisk, asterisk. The case of Stephanie Pavlons reminds us that in the end, the truth has more authors than we can ever imagine. And it always finds a way to be heard.